Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. The time has come to drop our first official Banzuke prediction of the new year. If it feels like the Banzuke is coming out awfully early, that's because it is. Normally it's released 2 weeks before the next Basho starts, but at the end of the year, they bump the timeline up a week. So the Banzuke will come out on December 22nd in Japan, December 21st for most of us, and there will be a 3-week gap between the Banzuke and the start of the January tournament rather than 2. I wonder what we'll have to talk about with all that extra time on our hands. Okay, as you can see, I've already got everyone set up in math order. If you're new to this process, in short, we take each wrestler's wins in the previous tournament, subtract the losses, and move them up or down that number of ranks. The relative order in which they land forms the foundation of how the next Banzuke will play out. Alright, let's start at the top. As you can see, Hoshoryu, he has gone up a half a rank. Onosato has gone down a half a rank. That's because Onosato was ahead, but finished with fewer wins in the previous Basho. When it comes to Yokozuna and Ozeki, whoever had the most wins in one tournament is the one who gets ranked higher in the next. But that's only for when they've already been at the rank. For that reason, Kotozakura, despite only having 8 wins, will remain at Ozeki 1 East, and Onishiki will go to Ozeki 1 West. This is because he's the new Ozeki. Starting in March, he'll switch spots with Kotozakura if he finishes the January Basho with more wins. I know that's pretty much what we're all expecting, but hey, let's not assume anything until we see it happen, right? Kirishima's 11-4 at Maegashira 2 East should push him into the Sekiwake 1 East spot. Takayasu's 8-7 at Komusubi 1 West will move him to Sekiwake 1 West. Yes, I know Takayasu was already in the Sanyaku, and should that move him up to Sekiwake 1 East? Well, if it was close, so if Kirishima was 9-6, and technically he'd be ahead mathematically by like half a rank, they would give it to Takayasu in that case. If Kirishima was 10-5, they'd still probably give it to Kiri, but then it might be a little bit more of a question mark. Then it might be one of those things where I would predict Kiri to go ahead, but I wouldn't be shocked if Takayasu got the East spot. But this much better of a performance from not actually that much further down the Banzuke, Kirishima absolutely should end up ahead of Takayasu, but they're both at Sekiwake, good for them. And just like that, we gotta get into the interesting stuff. So first, Oho, with nobody else earning a spot in the Sanyaku, Oho will only drop from Sekiwake 1 West to Komusubi 1 East. Now mathematically, we see Ichi Yamamoto is at the top of the leaderboard, but he's coming up from Maegashira 8 East. With Wakamoto Haru having been in the Joy, the top 16 wrestlers, and well within them having fought all the Sanyaku members, Ichi Yamamoto, not so much. Wakamoto Haru, despite being just behind mathematically, should be the one to get the promotion to Komusubi. There's definitely a preference for promoting guys into these important positions when they were already in those highest ranks of competition when at all possible. In this case, they're not cheating Ichi Yamamoto out of something he's earned. He went 11-4, that's 7 ranks, Maegashira 1 East is where he should land, so this works out okay. Now, if you saw the instant Banzuke, you may recall that I put Yoshino Fuji ahead of Ichi Yamamoto. Well, from what I just said, he's going up his 7 ranks? Yes. I am going more with the math. One thing that I've noticed over the last few predictions is that I have tried to read the tea leaves a little bit, not just go with the math. The math can be a little misleading sometimes. They make some decisions that don't directly align with the math of the situation. So I tried to swing towards figuring out how the committee thinks, and even though that let me get some picks right that weren't obvious, I also missed some picks that were obvious. So I'm trying to stick more with the math unless I have a good reason not to, and in this case, Yoshino Fuji, he was at the edge of the Joy, he's still getting over promoted, there's really not a reason to put him ahead of Ichi. It could still happen, I think it's still a close decision, but I don't see much reason for them to push Ichi back so Yoshino Fuji gets over promoted even more. If it was a situation where Ichi Yamamoto would still be getting his full promotion, then it might be different. But I don't think they're going to take that away from him. Ichi Yamamoto to 1 East, Yoshi to 1 West. Also, on the instant Banzuke, I had Wakataka Kage ahead of Ura. I have rethought that. because when they don't have a reason to do otherwise, they've tended to put the guy with the better record ahead in a tiebreaker situation. I really have no reason to think they won't do that here. I got a little bit blinded by the fact that Waka is always up here in the Sanyaku and the Joy, and Ura kind of bounces in and out, but that shouldn't really make a difference. Ura didn't sneak his way into this position. He was Maegashira 3 West. He had a good record from a tough position on the Banzuke. There's no reason to hold anything against him. There's no reason to put him behind Waka when other guys might not get that treatment. So Ura goes ahead to 2 East, Waka gets his regular 1 rank demotion to 2 West. Another change. Previously, I had Takano Sho ahead of Hakuoho. The reason I had Takano Sho ahead, even though mathematically he was a rank behind, is because he was in the Sanyaku. He was at Komusubi, Hakuoho was at Maegashira 1, and those coming down from the Sanyaku tend to get favorable treatment. But that feels wrong now for this reason. In this setup, Takano Sho, 5 and 10 at Komusubi 1 East, he goes down 3 ranks. Hakuoho, 6 and 9 at Maegashira 1 East, he's going down 2.5 ranks. They go down nearly the same amount, even though Hakuoho had another win. And 1 win is supposed to equal 2 ranks of movement. 6 minus 9 is -3, 5 minus 10 is -5, 2 ranks. But if they swap them around, Hakuoho gets 1 rank under demotion, he should go down 3, he's going down 2, whereas Takano Sho gets a rank and a half of under demotion. He should be going down 5, he's going down 3.5 instead. So by putting Hakuoho in front, he was at the top of the Maegashira rank, so that's still a really tough schedule, that should be respected. And Takano Sho, relatively speaking, is still getting it better than Hakuoho. He's getting a larger under demotion even in this setup. So this seems more fair, and when it's a coin flip, they should both end at Maegashira 3 in one order or the other. I'm gonna go with the more fair option. As crazy as the Banzuke committee's decisions can make us sometimes, I do think they try to be fair, even if their idea of fair might be different from ours. Next up, Tamawashi, Atami Fuji, and Daisho. I'm gonna stick with putting Tamawashi back at Maegashira 4 East, no demotion. Basically, the reason is he was in the Joy, he had a very tough schedule, that should get him the tiebreaker over the other 2. As far as Atami and Daisho go, I kind of defaulted to putting Atami up front, but I don't really think that makes sense. Yes, he had a Sanyaku match, I'm not sure that matters all that much. Daisho 10 and 5, Atami Fuji 8 and 7, if they're both in the mid ranks, generally speaking, the guy with the better record is favored. And even though I want to stick more with the basic concept of Banzuke creation and not really worry about who's the person getting moved into a certain spot, if this is a coin flip situation to the committee, Daisho's long-term record of success at the highest ranks may be just enough to push him over the top. So while I am ignoring the people involved as best I can in this instance, I do think the fact it's Daisho might matter. However, one really oddball thing that could happen, I don't think it will, if they think Tamawashi needs to get demoted to some degree, you could end up with something like Atami Fuji, then Tamawashi, then Daisho. If they demote Tamawashi, it should be Atami Fuji who gets that spot. I don't see a reason for them to do that. Tamawashi was equal to them mathematically, but he had that more difficult schedule. He should be at the top of that list, but if it were to happen, I think Atami ends up in the front. My guess though is Tamawashi goes to the front, stays at 4 East, Daisho gets the bump to 4 West, Atami Fuji gets his rank up to 5 East. Shiranaumi, the only real option for 5 West, he gets a half rank over promotion. And then we've got Onokatsu going up to 6 West. He cannot go higher than 6 West because he cannot be promoted with a losing record. I mean, he can, but they won't do it. So that leaves a gap at 6 East. Who are we going to put there? So one option is technically Hiradaumi. Now, he went 4 and 11. This would be a 3 rank demotion. That's very small. Some of you may remember the last Banzuke, Ichi Yamamoto, he was 5 West, he was 4 and 11, he only dropped to 8 East. That's only 2.5 ranks. So why wouldn't Hiradaumi get that kind of treatment? Well, the reason that happened with Ichi Yamamoto was because he was a half rank behind Tobizaru, which is why a lot of us assumed Tobizaru would get that spot, but they were the only options. And if Tobizaru took that spot, he was going up 7 ranks on 9 and 6. That's a lot. They decided, well, we're going to have a really screwed up situation with one of these guys. They decided to give it to Ichi Yamamoto. Whatever, fair enough. But with Hiradaumi, 4 and 11 at Maegashira 3 East, mathematically he's at 10 East, he's a full rank behind Fujinokawa, and not just Fujinokawa but also Kinbozan. Now Kinbozan can only go up to 8 west, so he's kind of out of this conversation. But I think they're likely to treat Fujinokawa as a better option than Tobizaru was. For one, he's going up 6 ranks rather than 7. That's still a ton, but it's not as much. Also, being a full rank ahead of Hiro to Umi is just, he's created a gap between them. You could look at the half rank difference between Ichi Yamamoto and Tobizaru as just a function of east versus west, but that's not really the case here. Both of them were on the east side and Fuji was ahead. Could they put Hiro to Umi at 6 east? Yeah, they definitely could, but even with what they did with Ichi Yamamoto, that strikes me as just a little too wacky of a move. So I'm going to put Fuji at 6 east, and then Hiro to Umi should definitely be ahead of Gonoyama and go to 7 east. -4 on 4 and 11 is still perfectly fine. That lets Gonoyama jump up to 7 west and Roga to 8 east, or does he? Oshoma here at 4 west. 4 west is also in the Joy and he fought all the Sanyaku. So if we move Roga back, he was 8 and 7 at Maegashira 11 west, so he's 1 rank ahead of Oshoma. I looked this up. How often were guys in this situation where one was in the Joy and finished mathematically a rank behind somebody from further down? How was that decision usually made? Well, what I found was even when the guy from the Joy was further behind, like a rank and a half, he pretty much always got the benefit of the doubt and was put ahead of that guy from lower down the rankings. Combine that with the fact that they're a little more hesitant to seriously over-promote someone on 8 and 7 because that is barely a winning record, and all signs point to Oshoma lucking out and ending up at Maegashira 8 East. He only goes down 3.5 ranks with that 4 and 11 record, but for him, that's really good. He doesn't drop too far, but he still drops into a position where he should be able to find some success. Kinbozan lands at 8 west. I don't think they're going to find a reason to just arbitrarily push him back, so that means Roga goes to 9 east. 2.5 ranks on 8 and 7, perfectly good. Next, Kota Shoho is stuck at 10 west, 7 and 8, can't go up. It was a perfect opportunity for him to gain some ranks, just blew it at the end. Toki Hayate all by himself, he drops into 9 west, +5 on 9 and 6, very nice for him. And on the instant Banzuke here, I put Shodai up here, because Midori Fuji, so if we move Shodai back, the next guy up is theoretically Midori Fuji. Now, these guys are all tied, Midori, Nishiki Fuji, and Chiyoshoma, but Nishiki Fuji and Chiyoshoma were near the bottom, and that tends to weigh a little bit on how guys are treated. Not always, but reasonably often. Midori was more of a mid-rank. But if we move Midori up here, that's only -1, and we've seen a number of times recently that's just not going to cut it in a lot of situations. If they can move him further back, they will. So if we drop Midori back to here, well, who's going to take that spot? If we put Chiyoshoma or Nishiki Fuji, like if we do that, that's okay, but Shodai was Maegashira 5 West, he had a couple Sanyaku matches, and if we do this with Chiyoshoma and Nishiki Fuji gets his full promotion, Chiyoshoma gets a half rank over promotion, and Shodai's not a terrible choice for that Maegashira 10 East spot. But I went over it and I went over it and I went over it, and I just don't think they're gonna do this. So we've got Chiyoshoma, Midori Fuji. I think they are going to still not put Midori Fuji up here. They'll put him back and Chiyoshoma goes up here. But there's also no reason to split these 3 guys up. So if they're gonna do Chiyoshoma, Midori, and Nishiki Fuji, then Shodai should go next. He was at the edge of the Joy, even though he had the worst record between him, Abi, and Tobizaru, I think they are gonna leave him ahead of those 2 guys, but there's no reason for him to split up that other group of 3. So we've got Chiyoshoma, Kota Shoho, and if we're just going to do things this way, I think we're going to have Nishiki Fuji ahead of Midori Fuji. Midori Fuji is still getting a little bit of an under promotion, and even though Nishiki Fuji is coming up from the bottom, the more I think about it, the more I think Midori Fuji is not high enough for that to be the tiebreaker. I think Nishiki Fuji's wins are going to end up being the tiebreaker. And Chiyoshoma going up 7 ranks with his 10 and 5, as odd as it looks, it's definitely not as strange as Shishi going up the same number of ranks with his 10 and 5 last time. So I've got Chiyoshoma, then Kota Shoho, then Nishiki Fuji, then Midori Fuji, then the next group of guys. With Shodai at 12 East, I'm sticking with what I had originally, Tobizaru at 12 West, and Abi getting over demoted to 13 East. And in one sense, oh, how the mighty have fallen, but really that's just a function of how recently he was performing at a high level, and now he just isn't. But the reality is, he really is not performing at much of a level at all anymore. It'll be interesting to see if he can find a way to get some wins down here at least, but that's a conversation for another day. Asanoyama is not going to end up at 13 East. He's not anywhere near this conversation, so we'll just ignore him for the moment. Coming up from Juryo, he's going to drop further back. But where? Well, usually there's some kind of gap in the guys who were in Makuuchi, and we can start dropping the Juryo guys into those gaps. But in this case, that's not really how it is. Tomokaze, 7 and 8. He goes down 1 rank. That's correct. Shishi, 6 and 9, going down 3 ranks. That's correct. Matakayumi and Ryuden, each 7 and 8, each going down 1 rank. That's correct. So if we look at the bottom of the division now, Asanoyama, really, the first place he can slot in is down here at 15 West. Now, could they over-demote guys to give him a higher placement? They could, but they won't, and I'll get into why in a minute. But then we have Asahakuryu, and then Hatsuyama, we drop him back. Kotoeho has to get dropped back. Oshoumi is not going to get over-demoted either, so he'll just stay there at 17 East. He saved himself with that miracle run at the end. And because there are 3 too many guys who qualified for a position in Makuuchi, these bottom 3 guys, Kotoeho, Fujiseiyun, and Daiseisan, all got to drop out. They're not going to make it. So if we scroll down a bit, we'll drop Fujiryoga back, Kageyaki back, Daiseisan's going to go back. Now, I put Fujiseiyun at 1 East on the instant Banzuke because I was like, well, he's going to get promoted on 8 and 7. What I paid no attention to was the fact that if I do that, Kotoeho goes to 1 West. He only goes up a half rank on 9 and 6. So unfortunate as it is, Fujiseiyun, there's a good chance he gets no movement on 8 and 7. He's still at Juryo 1 West. That's a pretty rare thing, but it has happened a little more in Juryo recently than it used to. So this is looking probable. Anyway, back to Makuuchi. Dropping Hatsuyama back, now let's just look at this whole thing and see if what we have makes sense. Like I said, Tomokaze, Shishi, Matakayumi, Ryuden, they're all getting the appropriate demotions. Asanoyama was 12 and 3 at Juryo 4 West. Coming up to Maegashira 15 East, that's still like a 6.5 rank increase. That's pretty good. If he had been 12 and 3 at Juryo 1 and there was the same kind of congestion at the bottom of the division, then maybe they bump these guys a little further back to make room for him, like at around Maegashira 13. But in this case, he's still going up quite a bit, so there's not going to be much compulsion to do that. Similarly, Hatsuyama was Juryo 5 East. With his 11 and 4, he's going up 5 ranks. There's no reason to push Oshoumi back. He can sit at the bottom of the division, that's fine. Now on the instant Banzuke, I had Asahakuryu ahead of Asakuryu. The reason was Asakuryu got his +1, that should be enough, we just leave it alone. But when you look at how everybody else is getting pinged back, Asahakuryu in this case is not getting pushed back all that much. And they do want to give the Makuuchi guys a little bit of a boost over the guys coming up from Juryo when it makes sense. And in this case, now I think it does make sense for Asakuryu to end up ahead. So I've got Asakuryu going up that rank and a half with his 8 and 7 record. Got the Juryo guys all there on the west side of 15, 16, and 17. Should be interesting to see how they schedule the next tournament with Asanoyama, Asakuryu, and Asahakuryu all coming from the same stable. Hopefully Oshoumi will be healed enough to not get completely rampaged on by those guys. And we'll finally get to see what Hatsuyama can do in the top division. I admit I'm not holding out a ton of hope, but hey, maybe he can keep up the surprises. And that is our official Banzuke prediction for Hatsu 2026. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, that'll do it for now. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.